everyone, and welcome to CHIU Style. On this channel, I'll take you into the world of classic novels and captivating tales, accompanying you on a journey through the power of storytelling. Today, I'm going to share with you The Enchanted April. In this episode, we'll step into chapters 1 and 2, and see how two women, on a dreary London afternoon, find their dreams unexpectedly awakened by a small newspaper advertisement. On a damp February afternoon in London, the air inside the women's club was heavy with moisture. Mrs. Wilkins had just returned from shopping in Hampstead. After a simple lunch, she idly picked up a copy of the Times lying on the table. Her eyes happened to catch an advertisement, a medieval castle on the Italian Mediterranean coast, available for rent in April. Fully furnished, with servants provided. For those who love wisteria and sunshine, please reply to the given address. The words pierced into her drab life like a sudden ray of sunlight. She was not wealthy. All she had was £90 in savings, scraped together year after year from the clothing allowance her husband gave her. Her husband, Mellish, was a precise and respectable lawyer. He always urged her to be thrifty, to save for a rainy day. He liked her plain dress, telling her she was perfect as she was. Yet she knew in her heart that such economy reduced her to little more than a colourless shadow. She loathed the London fog, the endless rain, and often dreamed of escaping it all, to some sunlit coast. But that was fantasy. How could she possibly afford such a thing? With a touch of frustration, she tossed the newspaper aside and walked to the window, staring at the wet street outside. Perhaps this was what Mellish meant by a rainy day? Perhaps her savings were meant for a moment just like this. And yet, the thought of an ancient castle possibly crumbling and damp made her laugh at her own foolishness. She was about to leave, to buy fish for her husband's super, for he would only eat sole or salmon, when she noticed Mrs. Arbuthnot sitting at a nearby table, her eyes fixed intently on the same newspaper. Mrs. Wilkins had never spoken to her. They both lived in Hampstead and had seen each other at church. Mrs. Arbuthnot was known for leading poor children to Sunday school. She seemed efficient and serious, yet her face carried a kind of sorrow, like a disappointed Madonna. She belonged to the type of church worker who classified the poor and organized relief. Mrs. Wilkins, on the other hand, had been drawn by her husband into circles of impressionist painters and artists, where she always felt out of place, dressed too plainly, too quiet, too ordinary. At those gatherings she was invisible, while her husband shone, handsome, reliable, always attracting new clients. But in church, Mrs. Arbuthnot's brisk competence confused her. Mellish always said, efficient people are never unhappy. Yet Mrs. Arbuthnot did not look happy at all. Now, as she bent over the newspaper, her eyes seemed dreamy. Summoning her courage, Mrs. Wilkins sat down opposite her. "Are you, by any chance, reading that advertisement about the castle and the wisteria?" she blurted. Mrs. Arbuthnot looked up in surprise. Yes, she was. In her mind had already blossomed visions of sunshine, waves, and fragrant blossoms. She asked gravely why Mrs. Wilkins would ask such a thing. Blushing, stumbling over her words, Mrs. Wilkins explained, she too had seen it, and today had been so dreadful that the advertisement seemed almost too beautiful. They began to talk. About church. About Hampstead. Mrs. Arbuthnot instinctively tried to classify her, perhaps as some unfortunate soul in need of advice. They admitted the advertisement was wonderful, but Mrs. Arbuthnot said such thoughts were useless, a mere waste of time. Mrs. Wilkins, however, insisted that the dreaming itself was worthwhile. Compared with the greyness of Hampstead, it was like heaven and earth. Mrs. Wilkins introduced herself, mentioning that her husband was a lawyer, very handsome. "Then you must be happy," Mrs. Arbuthnot said. But Mrs. Wilkins only shook her head. "Handsomeness was a gift of nature," she replied, "but it did not guarantee happiness." In her mind, Mrs. Wilkins suddenly saw a vision. The two of them sitting beneath cascades of wisteria, sunlight spilling over the walls of the castle. Leaning forward, she whispered, "Why don't we try to rent it?" Mrs. Arbuthnot's eyes widened. They hardly knew each other. But Mrs. Wilkins persisted, if they shared the cost, it might be possible to escape everything for a whole month of paradise. Mrs. Arbuthnot hesitated. She murmured her usual thought, that paradise must be found at home, within the heart, through effort. No, not like that, Mrs. Wilkins insisted. She had tried, but her home held no paradise. Mrs. Arbuthnot fell silent, troubled by her own doubts. It had been years since she had taken any holiday, and the advertisement fascinated her. Mrs. Wilkins's excitement was infectious. It felt as if she had woken from a long sleep. Together, they decided to write and ask for details. Mrs. Wilkins pointed out that it was no commitment, only a question. Mrs. Arbuthnot, accustomed to handling matters, drafted the letter. When they posted it, both felt strangely guilty, as though they had done something wrong behind their husbands' backs. Mrs. Arbuthnot's husband, Frederick, was a writer. He made a fortune publishing popular histories about the mistresses of kings. She considered his work sinful, and tried to atone by giving away much of their money to the poor. That evening, she prayed for guidance, but dared not pray for the castle to be unavailable, for what if her prayer was answered? She told herself that even if they spent the money, she could always earn more savings, and the work of helping the poor would go on. At a charity meeting that night, she spoke but could not concentrate. Her mind was full of sunlight and wisteria. The vicar was disappointed with her distractedness. She even suggested, half absently, that everyone ought to take holidays. April, perhaps? Meanwhile, Mrs. Wilkins went home and cooked fish for Mellish. He praised her thriftiness. She thought wearily that this life stretched on without end. That night she dreamed of the castle, wisteria curling across its walls, the sea whispering at its feet. The two women arranged to meet again, to await the reply. Mrs. Arbuthnot tried to remain composed, but her heart beat quickly. It was like the secrecy of lovers, mingled with guilt and anticipation. At last, the letter came. The castle was perfect. The rent was reasonable. They would need more companions to share the cost, perhaps 2 strangers. And so, they placed their own advertisement, seeking fellow travelers. Outside, in Hampstead, the rain continued to fall. But in their hearts, April sunshine had already begun. After listening to these 2 chapters, do you also feel a familiar sense of confinement? In the cold, damp streets of London, 2 seemingly unrelated women are drawn together by the same longing. A longing not for money, nor for fame, but for sunlight and freedom. In truth, Mrs. Wilkins and Mrs. Arbuthnot are a lot like each of us. Under the weight of busyness, responsibilities, and habits, we may have long forgotten our own desire for change. And yet, a single advertisement cracks open their daily routine, letting sunlight pour in. These 2 chapters remind us, the longings of the heart can be more real than we imagine, and they deserve to be heard. So, in the next part of the story, the 2 protagonists will finally take that step. They will place an advertisement, seeking 2 more travel companions. These 4 women, seemingly so different, will come together because of an Italian castle. In the next episode, the story will open up even more, and we will begin to glimpse, under the sunshine, will their lives truly change? Or will worries and shadows continue to follow them, like silent companions? Here, I'd also like to share a little special surprise I've prepared for you. If, like Mrs. Wilkins in our story, you want to add a touch of color and imagination to your gray, everyday life, I've created a digital coloring book called Britain's Streets, Color Fun Coloring Book. It contains 40 pages British street scenes, which you can download and print out to color by hand, or use on your iPad with Procreate. These streets include charming London alleyways, elegant English houses, bustling marketplaces, and tranquil courtyards. Each illustration is like a story waiting for you to bring it to life. If you enjoy creative time like this, feel free to scan the QR code in the video, or click the purchase link in the YouTube description or Facebook post, and bring this digital coloring book home with you. In the midst of a busy life, give yourself a little time to color, to relax, and to create. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, CHIU Style, give this video a like, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next exciting episode. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.